All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Pistolka, and I am excited for our guest today because we have none other than Ron Higgs from Wolf Management Solutions in here today. And we are going to be talking about building your business to create the exit you want. Ron, thanks for being here today.
Damon, thanks for having me yet again. I look forward to talking with you all the time.
Yeah, man, it's going to be great today because you've been helping a lot of people with your coaching using different operating systems for businesses and your experience over the years, and you've seen a lot of this stuff. You're in clients now. I really am excited about talking about this. So, first of all, Ron, you know the drill. We want to hear about your background and kind of how you got into doing what you're doing today.
Sometimes the universe conspires to set you on the right path. So I spent a long time in the military, got out and worked for defense contractors for a while. And I knew that there was just something else. There had to be something else, or, I had a different calling. So I left my job about 7 years ago and haven't looked. It took a little while to find my way. Worked for a few startups. Being out by yourself is difficult, so I found the support of some other solopreneurs. I just want to say now, I wish that there were some of the resources available then that there are now.
Yeah.
And you know how you could go back in time and tell yourself a few things. So
Yeah.
I would have saved myself a lot of time, money, and aggravation if some of these resources had been available
Definitely.
beforehand. And what I've found is that I really like to go in and help businesses solve their problems, people solve their problems, help people work together, figure out what the root cause is. All of us that get called in from outside a company for help get called because of some kind of symptom. Hey, we're having problems with X. You know what it is? And it's our job to go in and figure out what the disease is that's causing that symptom and fix it. And that I found that I really like. I also just personally, I spent most of my career in the military and working for defense contractors. So this gives me the opportunity to satisfy my curiosity about how things are done in other industries. And
Yeah.
that's exciting for me.
Yeah. Yep. So what are some of the things that you learned working for these other bigger companies sometimes, other smaller companies sometimes that you think are and see that are really good lessons to try to teach your clients today and helping them get their businesses operating better?
I will say this, the problems, no matter where you are, the problems and issues are all the same. As long as there are human beings involved, some of the things that you have to deal with are exactly the same.
Yeah.
I was a COO of a creative agency, and I looked around and they had the exact same issues, people problems, things like that, that that groups of engineers had, in other places that I've been, both working inside the government, the public sector and the private sector. So
Mhm.
the thing is that the big companies don't always do things right. They have lots of resources to throw things to throw at a lot of problems, and they don't necessarily get them solved. And so, unfortunately, I saw a lot of things in the big companies that didn't work. And it was good to be able to take some of those things that smaller companies were trying to do and say, that's not going to work on that largest scale. Right. And so again, just mostly the people problems that I observed. And those of us in leadership positions know that most of what we do during the day have to do with human interaction problems instead of, solving real tricky technical problems.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think that the technical part just changes at night too. Around our family.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to know. And it is really, I mean, your experience in the bigger companies, you see that they make mistakes like any other, but maybe they got more resources to deal with it, and things like that.
They do, but one toxic person can ruin, a large team in a large company the same way that one toxic person can have an impact on a small company. So a
Yeah.
lot of things are the same, right?
Yeah.
And I think from the larger companies, there are a lot of different things that go on in different teams that you know we observe and then are able to take back to some of the small companies to help them either avoid some of the problems that the bigger
Yeah.
companies have or fix some of them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure. Well, we got Abdul Rahman here. Thanks for being here today, saying hello. How you doing today? So as we're talking about this, you and I have started looking at different things outside of this and really thinking about how, like, the coaching work you're doing with systems like predictable success and that works together in preparation for a business exit or creating this business that will be ready for a business exit. So when you start to apply those things in that situation, what are some of the key things that come to mind from your standpoint?
So I've always believed, and some people don't, begin with the end in mind. And I know a lot of startups and places are doing this. Hey, we're going to build our widget with the hopes of getting bought by Google, for $1 billion, and we're moving on. Right? That's our exit. But small businesses that dot our countryside maybe don't think that way in terms of their exit. So if you are going to make an exit, you have, and you're the professional and I'm telling you this, right? You have to make your business as attractive to the prospective buyer as you can, right? And is a business where the most senior executive or owner is making all the decisions every day, is that going to be attractive for someone else to buy? If the owners are really deep working in the business, again, is that going to be attractive for someone else to buy? So for me, looking at some of the companies that I've worked with, there are three things that kind of stand out to help companies just operate efficiently. So when
Yeah.
they're ready to exit, whenever that is, that'll be attractive business to prospective buyers. So the first thing is building the right structure. Building the business, the structure, and the organization so that it supports, the product or service that's being delivered. And what I found in a lot of small businesses, the roles tend to be defined by the capabilities of the human being in that role, instead of what the company needs. So in other words,
Yeah.
they go with names. They go, well, Tommy does this and Jody does that, right? And you have to graduate from that point to the director of finance does this. The operations manager does this. So in terms of moving from, the names of people to titles, and those titles have to be what the company needs. And unfortunately, sometimes, the person in that title may not be the right person moving forward as the company grows.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a big change for people to come. I mean, first of all, because you may be talking about people that have been there a while, and the business is usually shifting away from their core capabilities, or you may have to restructure things based on the roles. There's all kinds of things that can affect that, but that is a big deal. Real quick, I want to say hello to AJ. Thanks for being here today, man. So if you're listening out there today, first of all, say hello. Let us know where you're listening from. And also drop some questions in there if you got questions for Ron or myself to talk about this. But we're hitting into roles because I think this is one of the big things when we look at creating a business, building your business to create the exit you want. You came right off the bat with what I think is a home run thing to do is think about the end in mind and what that business looks like when you're ready to exit. And you talked about owner involvement and making sure your owners are not critical to the daily function of the business and are not, deep in that value chain of delivering that product or service to the customer. So as you're looking at companies, how many times do you run into it where you go, hey, we really have to start at roles and structure?
Almost every time.
There we go.
Almost every time. I always start with the org chart because just about everyone has some kind of an issue with the org chart. And I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about the org chart, creating the roles and creating a structure that the company needs to
Yes.
operate and to grow or scale. Just growing and scaling aren't necessarily the same things.
Yeah.
Right. And there's decisions to be made too. Do you want to scale the company? I mean, do you want to grow it to, 10x of what it is now? Or do you just want to maintain? If you're an $8 to $12 million in ARR, do you just want to stay that forever and not grow? And those are two different things. And you're going to have to go through two different paths, to make either of those operations as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
And I know we're talking about people, so we could talk about the next step. Number one's building the right structure. So now that we're talking about people, is building the right team. So now that you have the right structure, now it's time to put the right people in those seats. And I'm a big fan of assessments. There's millions of them out there, right? And they're all right to some degree. But I think the bottom line is just to make sure that you're not building a team of people who think exactly alike. So for instance, visionary. Everybody knows what a visionary is, right? Visionaries, all the ideas, right? The idea people. Every time we turn around, we have a different idea. Just like, my dog and a squirrel, whatever is coming along, squirrel, right? So they go to a conference and they come back and they got a million ideas and they're driving their staff up the wall with all the million ideas because people can't keep up. And visionaries are great. We need them. But do you want to build an entire company full of visionaries or an entire leadership team full of visionaries, right? Maybe not, right? You may want some
I think you need a mix.
Right. You may want some people that are data driven, right? Some people that are task driven, right? Some people, if you have a sort of a low EQ, then you may want to pull somebody in with a higher one. But the bottom line, again, with all those assessments and everything, it's just make sure that you don't have a homogeneous group.
Yeah. That's a great starting point is as you said, define the roles and make sure you've got a good diverse set of people within those roles. I want to back again, the chat's going pretty hard. So we got to say, Melissa's here from San Diego. Great to have you here today, Melissa. Abdulrahman, he talks about diversity. We had AJ, he was in here before, but he's saying he's from New York City. Abdulrahman's in here from Cairo, which is cool, man. We usually don't get that. Steve Stokey, you know Steve?
Steve Stokey.
Yeah, there we go.
My neighbor, Steve.
There you go.
Thanks for dialing in, Steve.
Yeah.
Good to see you here.
And we got Croy Thompson's in here today. So thanks for telling us where you're coming in from. And sorry, Steve, about your last name. I am not that quick when we're trying to do this on the fly, but thanks so much for all the comments so far. So we're sitting here, we're talking about, you like to start the org chart. I think it's a great place because that org chart typically, as you walk in there, like you do, is just kind of evolved over time. And you said started off the conversation with structure. And I think that is so key to think about that structure. And like from your standpoint, is that structure appropriate today and for where we're going? And that's a cool part. But then you got into the roles and you said, okay, we've got people, we got positions where people are setting now, but what roles do we need for the company? Because like you said, if a director of finance, we need that today. And this is what we need them to do to enable what we're doing tomorrow. This is a big exercise for companies that they don't really understand sometimes. And because these leaders, these founders and people like that, they've been in this over time. And these are slow changes that happen over time. But we're really trying to make a pretty significant switch that allows and frees up and enables them to move forward much faster to where they want to go. So talk a little bit more about, developing these roles and then the select, how you get through this part of it.
Well, some companies, one, don't have org charts. So
Yeah.
you go in and it's like, okay, where's the org chart? We're pretty flat here. We don't have one of those. Well, I think the organization, you have to figure out who's doing what, understand who's doing what. And the biggest thing is where the decisions are being made. Who's the person responsible for said decision, right? And then there are other things that the company needs, right? So there are some examples where somebody has a title, and I ran into this in one company. They have the title of director of product, right? Whatever that meant. They're like, well, this person is the director of product, but they're not good with people. So so they're not managing any people. Well, if you have the title so the company needs someone with the title of director, right, to manage managers. I mean, it's an assumption if you don't have a senior manager level. So it's assuming if you're a director, you have managers or senior managers reporting to you, right? So how can somebody, and then also someone who with the title of director is probably responsible for some strategic and some business development responsibilities as well, especially in a smaller company. So the company, you have to go out and look at that. Okay, director of product. What does the company need the director of product to do? And back that up. So who are the internal customers for the director of product?
Yeah.
And then start working that way from who your internal customers are as you build that org chart and who's responsible for making what decisions. Because there are things that are amorphous. People go, you have project managers. Well, what's our project management discipline? Do we have a specific way we manage products here? Or I'm sorry, projects here? And nobody knows. Why? Nobody knows because there's no one human being who's responsible for it. So those of us who look in from the outside, who are consultants, we can come in and see things like that where the company may not be able to see it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just hit on a ton of good points here. What decisions need to be made in the company? Where's the right level to do them? And one of the things that you mentioned, I think, is rampant in a lot of companies is that people get titles just because we don't really know what else to do. It's like, okay, you're a vice president. Well, if everyone that works here is a vice president, is that right?
Right.
Walk into a bank. I'm just going to say, you think the big companies get it right, but they don't. And it's these kind of things are really important. So as you're going through this with people, what are some of the tools that are really available to you to match people with positions or help to develop these things out that coaches may be able to bring to the table?
Well, it's not, in this case, it's not necessarily tools. It's really just going through, again, what the needs are. Also, I looked at it when I was doing fractional COO work. I also looked at it as part of my job to prepare everyone in the company for their next job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so where is it in this structure that we're going to build? Do you have succession? Meaning when you go on vacation, whatever your job is, who's going to fill in for you? Who's going to make that decision for you? And then how are you growing the next person to take your job as you move on, to your next job, right? Do you want to go in a company where there's no clear path of ascension? Okay, what's the next step to increase responsibility? Right. So we also look at that. So systems, yeah. I also, again, use assessments. Again, there's some people, say you have a visionary, right? Visionaries are, what we talked about before. But detail work and precision work and say finance work, just really getting into the weeds in finance and, tax things like that requires somebody who's more data driven than a visionary. So if you put a visionary even a person who's great at their job, but they're great at doing visionary stuff. And if you stick them into a role like that, they may not succeed because that's not where their superpower is,
Mm-hmm.
not the way they're wired. So tools like that are good to help match people and their, behavioral types, leadership types, whatever you want to call it, to
Yeah.
specific goals.
Yeah. That's a great point. Matching people with their innate skills into a position, as you talked about, you got to know what we need in roles and then getting that right person in. And as you said, you wouldn't want to stick a visionary into a precision role that like an accountant or an engineer or something like that, necessarily. You also touched on something I think we're getting into, the topic, the really about creating that exit you want, and that is succession. Because one of the things that I'm sure that when you're coaching, I know that when we're looking at businesses that would need to be prepared to sell is owner involvement. Uh,
Right.
from a coaching perspective, what are some of the things that you look at, and how do you help those owners really get to the right place in their business?
So, and I'm sure you've seen this. You go into a place and look, and I typically run in. I'll just put the situations in the kind of three different buckets, right? The first bucket is the owner's just driving everything. Owner makes every decision, drives everything. Place is completely paralyzed, when the owner's not around, right? The next situation is that there's a lot of complexity in the organization, right? So there's insufficient systems and processes to deal with that complexity. So the norm is firefighting. So you got a lot of firefighting, you got a lot of infighting with people. And one of the things is decision implementation, right? So the people at the top make decisions very quickly. And then they meet again a month later and say, hey, where are we on that? So, and nothing's gotten done. So they have trouble implementing those decisions, right? So that's sort of one, phase that a company's in.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the other one is maybe when they're over processed and bureaucratic,
Yeah.
meaning the company's just a bureaucracy, sorry. And they have a system and process for everything, even things that don't necessarily need systems and process. So in other words, they're so focused on getting the checklist done that they miss the point of why the checklist is there to begin with. So let's take onboarding, for example. Hey, here's the onboarding checklist. This is what you have to do, right? And they're so focused on making sure that that person gets through the onboarding checklist, but they don't check to see if the onboarding is actually effective.
Yeah.
Right. So they're more focused on that process than they are on, whether things are really working or not. So as you probably know, one of the biggest is when the owner is driving everything. So that's the big thing, stepping in or looking in from the outside and going, if you're making every decision in the company, how are you going to sell that? Who's going to buy it? Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of nuances here, right? Because some people, their entire identity is wrapped up in that company and doing that and being the hero and making that decision all the time. But when it's time to move on, that's going to have to change. And so then we have to really work with the owner to start pushing decisions down to, working on that structure, getting the right people in that place so we can push the decisions down to the lowest level possible. Operating with an executive team, making decisions as a team, things like that, and having the owner slowly extricate him or herself from all of that. And that's easier said than done. It's a challenge, but it's the biggest one.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is that owner, making all the decisions, and if they're a critical resource to the business, when you look at that from building your business to create the exit you want, and you think about building your business value, where's your business value then? Usually your business value is in your sales, the revenue stream. It's in the team that you've built, the assets that you have in the business. But when you build that business around, when that owner builds that business around themselves that much in terms of an exit, they're a lot of the value of that business today. But if they're leaving tomorrow, how much does that affect the value of the business? And that's something we talk about every single time when we're talking about selling a business, is that owner involvement, because it's so critical. So
sales, big time, right? Because that's
yeah,
relationship driven. So if the owner owns all of the relationships, when it's time to move on, how's that going to work? And how's that going to work with the value? That's just what you were hinting at, with how the value the business. And
yeah,
so we want the owners to get as much as they possibly can from the business. And so to drive up that valuation, they're going to have to start extricating themselves from every facet of the business.
yeah. So let's take a little step back here. Now, when you're not coaching someone that's thinking about exiting your business, is this much different, your approach of getting the owner into that spot, or is it a lot different?
Nope, not at all. Right? Because if you walk into somewhere and the owner's running everything, again, we have to get them to the point. I mean, even for their sanity,
Yeah,
where where they're running, the business isn't running them. With they own the business. At some point, the business owns them. They can't get away, even if they want to. Hey, I
yeah,
wish I could take vacation. I can't. Right? All of that stuff. Right? So it impacts everything. It impacts their work-life balance. All of these things. And so that happens whether folks are thinking about making a sale or not. So that's why, having that business running like a well-oiled machine without, direct everyday owner involvement in every decision, I think that that's good wherever they are in their journey, whether they're
yeah,
just, a year into it or, 6 months from an exit.
yeah, yeah. I agree, and it's interesting though, and I don't think a lot of people believe this when it's coming from me as much as it would be from somebody else. It's like, listen, if you prepare to sell your business today, it's very similar to what any good running business should look like. It's doesn't have too much owner involvement. It's got good solid growth, and it runs well. I mean, those are the simple things of that. So when you're looking at this and you've gone through, now we got roles and got right people in the roles. We discussed this with the owner. They're moving into their right roles. What are some of the other things that you get to deal with in these clients typically?
Creating or refining the right processes. So, in other words, when businesses are small, things are easy. They're delivering a product or service in an environment of relative simplicity, driven by the numbers of people, the numbers of clients, and the number of products or services. So, in other words, if you're just starting out and you have one product and you have 5 or 6 people, or less than 10 people, well, it's pretty easy. And it's pretty easy to deliver that product.
Yeah.
And it's pretty easy to kind of make things up as you go along. And it's pretty easy to use anecdotal data, to make decisions, and gut feelings to do that. But when the company starts to grow, when you have more people, now you have 25 people, the way you communicate with 5 people, totally different than the way you communicate with 25 people. We talked about decisions. When you have 5 people, you can make and implement decisions very quickly because the doers and deciders are the same people. When you have 25 people, right, the doers are a different group of people than the deciders. So the deciders can say, yeah, we're going to do that. Well, how do you float all that down and get that done? Right?
Yeah.
There's elements of communication, buy-in, all sorts of those things, right? So you have to start putting in systems and processes, and you have to start making data-driven decisions instead of anecdotal decisions. So, right, building those systems and processes are a big deal. So there
Yeah.
was one place I worked with, just a system, just to get a proposal out. It took them 3 weeks to get a proposal out. And the managing director was the bottleneck in that. So if the managing director was out, or how quickly that proposal got done was a direct result of how busy the managing director was.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so let's involve. And so you break down all the steps and all the things that were needed to get a proposal out. Okay, the managing director would go to, a project manager and the account manager and a couple other people to start asking questions about the proposal. Well, why not? Let's look at the entire process, look at the entire inputs, and see where you can build that proposal without the direct involvement of the of the managing director, and to do it as quickly as possible. So once we did that, we looked at that. We involved everyone who touches the proposal, and we sat in a room, and in about 2 hours, we sketched out a process where every human being in the process had a backup. We also had 3 people that could sign the proposal out, right? That included the review. So no, the proposal could not leave the company without at least a review from 2, with a bunch of sets of eyes on it, right? So we were able to get that down from 3 weeks to 48 hours. We even got one out by the end of one day. So in the morning we were asked, and we got it out by the end of the day. Why? Because we just sat down and worked through who needed to be involved in it. And there's another thing that we did too, which was we pushed down some decision-making responsibility. Those of us who do these things are familiar with change orders, scope creep, all of these things, right? So if there was any kind of a change order, they would also flow that all the way back up to the managing director. So what we did is we gave the account managers the authority to sign change orders. Well, it was a big deal. That got things happen quickly. And if the account manager was uncomfortable with it, then there was a way to escalate it to get help with that decision. But the bottom line was that through process, we took something that took 3 weeks and reduced it down to 48 hours, and made it consistent and made it not dependent on any one human being. There were no bottlenecks. And believe it or not, again, sat in a room for 2 hours. That's all it took to change that process.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the impact of that kind of thing over the long term for that business, and then also the value that creates to the next owner by being, being able to, people have gone through the process of redesigning a process and implement it and doing it, which is huge, because a lot of companies get kind of fixed on how they've done things. But the second thing is, with that kind of speed and flexibility compared to where they were before, the business is going to be much more successful.
Right. We also instituted their feedback, right? We got people a lot more comfortable with, with providing feedback. And there was also a feedback loop for the process to see how we can continuously improve it.
Ooh, that's really good. That's really good. So we started out, we're talking about, building this business. And first of all, we just recently confirmed, hey, if you want to build a good business, you're probably doing some of the right things to create that business or to create that exit you want, because a good running business today is much closer to the one that you want to take with you through the exit tomorrow. And started out, you said, I like to start by people showing me their org chart. We worked through roles and responsibilities. Then we talked about succession, and we worked through the different challenges where the owner controls everything, where there's too much complexity, where there's nothing gets done because there's really not decisions getting done and over processing. And then you just ended up with a great example of how processes and systems, getting those things in place, can really help to free up critical resources and streamline to get things done faster. And when you look at these changes that you've talked about, these are some of the things that in the market, when you're going to get ready for an exit, that next buyer is going to be looking for a lean, well-operating company that they can take to the next level, because they make their real money by growing the value over time. And you really, by doing what you were saying, sets it up nicely. So as you're going through with clients, what are some of the realizations that these founders have working through the process of coaching, through the process of really building that business that's running better and can create the exit they want?
One of the biggest things is overcoming some objectives. Like, how am I going to do that? How are we going to do that? Right. And then when it happens, first people start off as sort of skeptical. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
believe me, this is going to work. And by the end of it, when they see that the business is no longer owning them and that they're getting to, that work-life balance that they desired in the first place, right? That impact, the emotional impact, to be able to spend time with their families. Somebody said, I've never been able to go to my son's soccer game before. I took him to the game early, stayed afterwards, and now I'm an assistant coach for the soccer team
Yeah.
because they were able to free up all that time. So I like to use sports analogies in this case. And I think, at some point you are, let's say you're a player. And if you're a person that started your own business because you were tired of working for somebody else, at some point you were a player and you decided to leave, like, I don't want to do this, right? And you go somewhere else, you start your business, and then you become the team captain, right? At some point, you have to step off the field and be the coach, right? Coach doesn't make plays, right? The coach coaches others. And then you evolve to the head coach, which means you have to find an executive team. You have to use that team and lead the business to that team, right? So head coach, well, what's next? Owner. Where's the owner during the game? The
They
owners
can be wherever they want. They might be in the box. They might be sitting on vacation somewhere else too.
Right. The owner's in the box, just enjoying what they built and watching it go. What do you want to be the owner?
Yeah.
Right. And if you really look at a sports analogy and go from that, if you're the coach right now, looking at making that, that eventual evolving to the owner really is where you want to be. And again, the owner is the one, like the teams get sold all the time, bought and sold all the time, right? And that's done at the owner level.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. I want to say real quick, Curtis Tompkins is here. Curtis, great seeing you today, man. Says, love the convo, gentlemen. Can't beat receiving these golden nuggets. Thank you so much for stopping by and dropping a comment, Curtis. Always appreciate it. I love your analogy, Ron, from player to coach to head coach to owner, because sometimes I don't know if this happens to you, but you come in and you sit down with that founder, that owner that's been in there a while, and they go, well, if I do this and they're all doing that, what am I supposed to be doing?
Well, that's finding their way because their entire identity is wrapped up in the business. And so they're asking themselves that question, right? What is it? Have I gone as far as I can go, right? Should I sell? That may be why they're talking with you. Should I step down? Should I hire somebody else to run the business? I mean, that's kind of a normal progression. The thing is that what they can do now is do only the things that they can do, right? Because there's a bunch of things that only they can do. Now you get to spend time in your zone of genius doing only the things you want to do and all of the things that you're best at.
Yeah. Yeah. That is in my experience, when they understand, as you said, that player to coach to head coach to owner role, when they really get to that head coach and then ultimately into that owner role, things get a lot more interesting for them, because they can, especially if they're looking at an exit, they can really envision themselves after the business, and they can envision the legacy they're creating, and they can envision, and they can really help to mentor people today.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we're talking about this, we're getting about to the point that we're wrapping up here. What are some of the things that you enjoy the most about being able to go out and coach people and work with their businesses?
All right, this is going to sound weird, but the org chart thing, I actually really like doing it. I really like going and building org charts and building that structure and helping people, put the right people in the right place. But the biggest thing is that I really like as a coach, fractional COO, all the things I've been doing is to see somebody when they actually get it. When something happens, when they either make a change, they make an improvement, they make a decision, or they have this moment of self-reflection based on some guidance that I've provided.
Yeah.
Right? I like to see people succeed. I like to see people thrive, and I really like to guide people to do more than they thought they were able to do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, parting thoughts for the day, Ron. Parting thoughts for the day.
Well, we talked about a couple of things, but those three things, let me summarize those, right? So, building the right structure, building the right team, and creating or refining the right processes. Those three things.
Oh, yeah. The right structure, the right team, and building the right processes. Because that is great from day one. I'm telling you, and it will continue to serve you all the way until the end if you just keep working on those things.
Let me say this. I met someone about a year ago who owned his own business for more than 20 years. Asked, "Have you ever thought about you ever thought about an exit?" "No, I hadn't really thought about that." "Well, maybe you should give it some thought. I mean, how do you want to leave? Are you going to turn it over to your kids? Do you want to sell it to someone else? Do you want to get acquired, by a larger company? What is it?" And that, sparked some thought, which was good. And I think that, again, just being able to guide people from something they hadn't thought about to like, oh, maybe this is something I should think about. Yeah. So if you're out there and you aren't thinking about this, whether you want to exit, Damon, this is your territory, right? Whether you want to exit in a year, you want to exit in 10 years, it's not too early to start planning for that.
Well, yeah, and as you said, the process of working on your business allows the owners to really work on one they want. And you made a great example of the owner is now able to go to their soccer game with their kids or whatever the thing is. They can spend more time outside of the business as well as being more valuable to the business when they're there. And I think that's the thing that people owners honestly get confused is like having a business that will really create the exit you want runs well today. And as you said it earlier in this, is ready to exit whenever the time comes, because we don't know when that time to exit is going to come. It's not like we're going to do it next Tuesday at 3:45, because you can't control when a buyer is ready to buy your business. You can't control when the market's right. You can't control what your health does. You can't control what nature does.
Right.
There's so many things that you can't control, that preparing for your eventual exit by running a good business today, doing the things you talked about, is good at any point.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do want to, I have to throw in a plug for coaching, because I am a coach. If a lot of people may realize like, wow, I do have my hands in every cookie jar, in this business, and I am making all of the decisions. It's really hard for them to say, okay, I'm going to stop doing that. Right.
Yeah.
So their coaching can help. Coaching can help with that. Coaching can help hold them accountable, in the step-by-step things they have to do to get there. Right. And coaching provides, again, that outside perspective, because everybody in your business and everybody around you may be too close to the problem to be really objective about it. So your coach is getting to know you. The coach could also look at your business objectively. And so coaching is a really good way to help start that change if you're looking to get to that owner status.
Yep. And now just like you use the athletic or the sports analogy, listen, there's a reason why high level athletes have a strength coach. It could be a position coach, could be a mental coach, just you just name it, right? The social
Yeah.
media coach, or PR person. I mean, there's a reason why people have these, because we don't see what we don't see. And when we can help, and when others can help us work through those things and get on the right path, it can make a huge difference. So good stuff, Ron. So if someone wants to connect with you, Ron, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn.
There we go. Ron Higgs on LinkedIn. The profile picture
Yeah,
I will never forget, because that is you in that plane,
it
fighter
is.
jet. We didn't get to talk about that much, but it is. Thank you for your service as always, and thanks for all you do helping these businesses.
Well, it was a privilege and an honor for me to serve my country. And this is something that I really enjoy. I'm glad I decided to leave corporate America when I did. And I'm happy for those experiences, but I'm much happier on the path that I'm on now. And thanks to
Awesome.
everyone out there supporting this, who came out to support um, this this show. I really appreciate it. Croy, good to see you. Steve, good to see you. We have to catch up soon. Curtis, everybody else, thank you guys.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for stopping by today. I really, like as Ron says, appreciate you stopping by, putting your time in, listening to us, and really, if you know of someone that would benefit from this, maybe forward it over to them, have them come by, take a look at it. Also, if you got in here late and want to start from the beginning, just roll it back and get going. And we will be back again next week. Ron, hang out for a moment. We'll finish up offline.